I'm Brian Washburn, Research Director with Omdia. I'm joined today by Rajarshi, Vice President with Tata Communications. We're here today to speak to you about the topic of SASE, choosing the right path for your business. If you're in an enterprise IT department covering networks or security, chances are that you've already heard about SASE, or the Secure Access Service Edge, which pulls together networks with cloud security under one umbrella. But let's just jump right into it. Raj, you're on the front lines and you've got regular conversations with enterprises. How have you seen SASE emerging here in these past few years?
Yeah, that's a brilliant question, Brian, and thanks for introduction in the first place. Before we look into SASE and the implication of SASE per se for the enterprises, let's take a step back, right? And let's look at what CIOs are going through at this point of time. As we see, every CIO is bogged down with something which they are building as a hyper-connected ecosystem for themselves. And this hyper-connected ecosystem is heavily technology dependent, right? And in this, the business requires a combination of infrastructure, application, processes, skills to enable connection and collaboration amongst the various stakeholders in the ecosystem, right? Now, the CIO is tasked to ensure that they deliver seamless experience for their workforce, their customers, etc. And this is where they have to bring multiple disparate technologies, in various areas like connectivity, collaboration, cloud, IoT, security. And this leads to incredible amount of complexity, correct? Uh, Obviously, there are other challenges that the CIOs have today in terms of their legacy, their organization silos. We are not going to go there. But what CIOs want is something which can reduce their complexity, right? Which can actually simplify things. And SASE is I'd say, a great way forward, specifically because in the new age where things are distributed, whether it's your application or people, they are demanding that security is closer to the edge. And that's where SASE is going to be a great help to enterprises. So, think about the CIO's complexity, how we can reduce the complexity of the CIOs. And SASE is an excellent way forward from that perspective.
That's great. Thank you, Raj. And yes, there's a lot of complexity that we see as well that enterprises are trying to wrestle with. And in some research that we've done, co-sponsored with Tata Communications, we found that about 50% of large enterprises have got some level of SD-WAN adoption, and about 30% of enterprises have some interpretation of SASE. So given that a lot of enterprises are kind of on this journey towards SASE, what sort of challenges do you see that enterprises want to address when they are looking to implement SASE? You've started with simplicity, but are there others as well?
Oh, 100%. See, again, when we think about SASE, one of the first things we have to understand, and what we are listening and hearing back from our customers, is that, because the users are distributed, because the applications are distributed, it's no longer in one data center in one region. And obviously, the network has shifted from a private network, which was MPLS or point-to-point links, to internet. What's happening for a specific CIO or the CTO or CISO coming together is that, in the earlier years, you had a set of security rules which you could have in the data center because the internet, used to go out from there, right? And everything else was private. That is no longer the case. And therefore, with, say, for example, I'm here, working from home today, and I want to reach out to XYZ applications. How will my organization ensure that security policies are there in place without taking me through a scenic route or a very, very non-optimal route, where I'm being forced to go to a data center, which was the earlier years, right? We used to actually go do everything through VPN. And I used to hate that, right? Today, I don't even know that as a user, my experience is totally different because I don't have to do that, right? I can straight connect to my broadband and access my applications. And that is the user requirement which is driving the uptake of something like SASE, right? So, rather than looking at what SASE can bring in from a feature functionality, I would actually say that what it does for the users first, what it does for the customers, right? And how it makes life simpler for the end users, and then see what it gives to the organization in terms of what I talked about, right? You don't have to really be bogged down or mired down on a lot of complexities that all these technologies bring together. If there's a simpler way, and which we see is there, rather than doing SD-WAN separately, SSE separately, if you do it together, it can drive a lot of efficiencies. It can drive experience back to the users, and along with a few other things. I'm sure you have heard that also, right? From what you heard from the customers in the survey that you did, right? So, Brian, do you want to speak about a few of them?
Yeah, these are familiar themes. And when we did some of this research, we found that there's certain drivers or certain personas that different enterprises fall into, and some of them fall into more than one. Typically, three of them are fairly straightforward because SASE covers cloud and security and the network. There are things that enterprises want to accomplish in network standardization, security upgrades or simplification, or you're working with multi-cloud connectivity that they look to bring forward with SASE. The other three factors are more about operations and improved experiences. So improving management, making it simpler and easier to manage their estate, improve the user experience, or there's always lowering their total cost of ownership. Again, not necessarily through less spending on equipment and services, but overall making it easier, more streamlined, and more efficient for their internal operations.
And sorry, Brian, one more question here, and this I also find very interesting. Earlier when we used to talk to customers, they would say, I'm heavily reliant on one cloud. But more and more, we are seeing that customers are going multi-cloud in a far, I'd say, balanced manner, right? If that is the right word, meaning that, they'd say, earlier they would say, I'm there mostly with one hyperscaler. Today they are saying, I'm doing a balanced approach, which means the complexity of multi-cloud is also increasing, right? And that's where we see that SASE is going to simplify it. Do you agree to that?
Oh, absolutely. And one of the things that we see with multi-cloud that makes that whole situation more complex is that in some cases, enterprises are using different clouds for different things. So they look at it thinking that they don't really have a multi-cloud strategy because they're not connecting clouds directly to each other. But they do have that, for instance, the hybrid cloud requirement where they want to make sure that everything is working smoothly and properly with the levels of performance that they need. So in that respect, multi-cloud is becoming very important. And for SASE to be able to secure and provide performance to those connected clouds, that's where there's kind of one of the areas where it brings a lot of value. But let's go ahead and move on to looking at, say, platform preferences, because I mentioned earlier on, and I'm sure you see this as well, that there's when we talk about SASE, enterprises have got different ideas of what that means. Some people have got the vision of fully integrated single platform SASE. Some are still cobbling together pieces, parts, and some are someplace in between. What do you see out there in terms of what your enterprise customers and the enterprises you talk to are trying to do with their SASE implementation.
Yeah, again, this is something which we hear almost on a weekly basis, if not daily. uh, Specifically when I think about the discussions that I had, say, a year back, right? It was more to do with let's talk about network transformation. In that, let's talk about the overlay, which by which they would mean that it is SD-WAN only. More and more, we are hearing that, hey, I've done SD-WAN, I've done SSE. How can that be integrated, right? Because for most of the customers, we see that these are two different islands, and it's not integrated properly. And some of them have only done SSE, or some of them have only done SD-WAN. So they are now saying that, okay, there is a requirement of SSE and there is a requirement of SD-WAN. So how do we integrate it better? Now, in the market, obviously there is options available to the customer. They can do an integrated SASE with one vendor, or they can choose two vendors and integrate them from an operation efficiency and so on and so forth, right? Uh, Many a times the decision is driven more so by what they have done at this point of time, and therefore, what are the returns they're looking at, right? And sometimes it is also done in terms of the efficiencies they'll gain. So, for example, if you have 50,000 users across 200 locations globally, for you to change the SSC to an integrated SASE model may be more complex, and you may not get the business case out of that. However, if you have not started the journey, looking at an integrated SASE may be a better solution depending on where you are, right? For the smaller customers, what I'd suggest is, if they look at integrated SASE from day one, it's going to give them better returns, specifically from simplicity and productivity perspective, and what they have to drive, right? If you do not have a large IT team, believe me, an integrated SASE is going to give you much better returns. That's what we see. Brian, is that what you also see in the market? Has that been the resonance, or what you hear back from the CIOs?
Yeah, this lines up 100% with the research that when we look at enterprise satisfaction with their SASE deployments, when we start with the pieces, parts of SASE, such as the precursors of SD-WAN or SSE being deployed standalone, customers or enterprises there generally sort of have mediocre levels of satisfaction. The more they get into significantly sized SASE deployments and more integrated SASE deployments, the happier they tend to be with that outcome. And then, of course, you have among the least satisfied customers, and again, this is probably no surprise, are those that try to manage or self-manage all of SASE on their own without any outside help. And that brings us to a naturally important question here. What do you see that the advantages are that Tata Communications brings to the table as a managed services partner for those enterprises that are evaluating their SASE stance, or how to implement or how to evolve their SASE stance further?
Okay. And again, this is one question that uh, both people that know me for long would ask me, and of course, people who do not know me would say, "Hey, Raj, what are you bringing to the table, right? What is Tata Communications bringing to the table? Why shouldn't I do it myself, or why shouldn't I look at somebody else?" Well, you know, I'd start again with a different perspective here, right? One of the things that we are bogged down with today is information and an overload of it, right? Uh, and what that means is that for you to choose what to do and what exactly to take becomes even more difficult. It's like going to a department store where you want a white shirt and there are too many of them out there, right? Which one to choose is a good question, and many a times, you just say, okay, let me just pick up one of the white shirts, right? uh, the point is, one is that, specifically, this is not a white shirt that we're talking about. It's a service, which means there is day zero, day one, and day two. Day zero is where most of the enterprises and the CIOs have the information, have the wherewithal to see what they want, but can they choose the right platform which makes sense to them? Uh, is a good question. And the advantage that we bring to the table is that since we work with multiple enterprises, we have built a model and an expertise to understand and give recommendations of what would work the best. That's point number one. When it comes to day one, which is delivery, uh, you know, many a times people don't understand that when you're talking about SASE, you're touching individual users, right? And that's where you're not doing an implementation for 200 sites. You're actually implementing it for 50,000 users, which means the complexity is much more. Do you want to get into that kind of complexity? Do you have the wherewithal to deal with that kind of complexity? And when it comes to day two, which is the management of it, the service life cycle, uh, here is where the rubber hits the road, right? I have not seen one customer, Brian, where you do the first install and forget it, right? It's a continual process. Somebody has to really look at it and say, have I done it right? What can I do better? If that is not being done, uh, I can tell you that they're losing out. The enterprises are losing out either because it's becoming more and more inefficient, or they're losing out on features and functionalities which should come together because either the industry in which the business is demands it or the business itself demands it. Now, that kind of complexity and knowledge base is very hard to have within the enterprise because you're not looking at the entire ecosystem, right? We as a managed service provider are deploying it, managing it for multiple enterprises, and therefore we have a visibility and a bird's eye view of, hey, what's this enterprise doing in manufacturing, in BFSI, and therefore this is something which is interesting. Let me take it back to this customer, right, and say, hey, they've done it, they've gained X, Y, and Z. Do you want to try it out? Do you want to look at it, right? Some things can be automated, right? And that's where the development work comes in. And that's what we continuously invest in terms of saying that, okay, when I do this, this is the X percentage improvement in productivity that my customers are going to get. Again, these are very soft things, which is not visible in day one. It comes in the life cycle, which we as managed services operator and player bring to the table, which, Brian, I can tell you, brings immense value back to my customers. And that is the reason why also I proudly go back to my customers and say, you should know that we have one of the highest NPS in the industry because we deliver well. And then we ensure that my customers are extremely happy, right? So that's what Telecom brings to the table there, Brian.
Yeah, it's great. And it's also something similar to our own experience when we talk to enterprises that are looking to deploy complex new technologies such as SASE. Um, if they are looking to do these sorts of things themselves, we still always recommend that they partner with key service providers so that they have, even if they plan on doing everything themselves, they have an insurance policy of an expert partner that can help them with their deployment in case anything goes awry. Ideally, of course, you want to tap a lot more of the expertise of a partner who's done this before in order to help show the way and guide them to a successful outcome. But there is also a political aspect to this, that you have both the CIO and the network and cloud resources and the CISO and the security assets that need to be brought together. And is there something that Tata Communications can do here in making sure that both of these CXO roles are kept involved in developing and deploying a SASE strategy?
Yeah, that's a I know that's something that is how do I put it, Brian? That's a fact, right? That there is a political situation there where specifically for larger organizations, the network function and the security function were looked at differently, right? Uh, now, reality of today is that the since the applications have moved to the cloud, the security needs to come closer to the customer, to the users, right? And with that as a background, it's a demand of the time. It's a demand of right now, right here, what to do, and it is therefore kind of forcing the two heads to work even closer together, right? And this is something that we have seen, in the recent past, that while Brian, you're right that there was a huge political divide between these two different forces, they are coming together because that is what the requirement of today is. And yes, we have, or we are continuing to play a role in ensuring that both of them come together in terms of showing what are the advantages that both of them get, right? And in doing so, what are they gaining rather than what they're losing, right? Many a times this political scenario arises because both of them think that, hey, I'm going to lose something. But given the fact that things are moving forward, and they are moving at a very rapid pace, right? uh, the the requirement of the expertise, the requirement from them is actually going to go up. It is not going to go down in the near future. And if what our job is to showcase to them that, hey, you are here today, this is where you're going in the journey, what are the changes which will happen and how it is going to uplift you, and more importantly your team, right? Because most of them talk about their team and not for themselves, right? So that's the role that we play. And of course, when they see that we are actually making their life easier, we are uplifting their team, improving and helping them meet their objectives which they are being constantly asked for, there is a difference which happens, and we are seeing that, and is what I'm going to say.
Great. Well, I guess as we're starting to wrap, one of the important pieces that we haven't addressed yet is where you see all of this is going. Are there particular critical future capabilities in SASE that you're seeing that enterprises should be keeping their eye on, for example?
Brian, that was my question to you. That you we speak to customers on a daily basis and hear something which is here and now, and obviously we have a view and I have a view, but Brian, I'm sure you have a better view out here. So if you can answer that question, it'll be better for all the listeners.
Yeah, well, thank you. It's actually our perspective, or my perspective, is fairly pedestrian, and it goes back to the things that you spoke about earlier, Raj. That simplicity is so important with all of these complex moving parts that are brought together in a way to create kind of a single experience. Is, I think, the piece that we'll be working at, or enterprises will be working at for a long time, to take their estate and make it into something that's simple to use, that's flexible, that can be scaled up when they need it, and turn the entire kind of network underlay and managed services overlay into a single fabric that they can control. These aren't, they're not rocket science areas in terms of the concepts, but these simple concepts are going to be complex and will take time and expertise to execute on. So that's where SASE, I don't think, brings a lot of revolutionary ideas, but the flexibility of all of the pieces under that network security cloud umbrella is what makes it such an interesting technology that will be delving into deeply in years to come. But with that, Raj, I think we'd best wrap here. And I wanted to thank you again for your time and insights today. And
thank you, Brian.
Yeah, And if you're an enterprise that's evaluating your SASE journey, we strongly recommend that you start a conversation with an expert services partner. We find in our research that enterprises lean heavily on partners to help them with their SASE design and all the way through to their day-to-day operations. So thank you again, everyone, for your time and attention today.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.